It all started on a completely ordinary day. Morning, just like any other. As usual, I kissed Sarah goodbye, wished the kids a good day, and got into my car. I was driving to work, listening to the radio, running through my plans for the day in my head. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. Absolutely nothing. And then, it wasn't just discomfort. It was a sharp, piercing pain that literally tore through my chest. I had never felt anything like it before. At first, I thought maybe it was just a spasm, or maybe I'd twisted the wrong way. But the pain kept growing, becoming unbearable. I couldn't catch my breath. My vision started to blur. I tried to pull over to the side of the road, but my hands wouldn't obey, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. The last thing I remember is my car slowly drifting off the road, and the world around me starting to blur, turning into some kind of murky, gray fog. Then, total darkness. A void. I came to in the hospital, or at least that's what it seemed like. There were white walls all around, a bright, blinding light. I could hear voices, but they were muffled, as if coming from far away. I could feel things attached to my body, IVs, wires, some kind of tubes. The hum of machines was a constant, monotonous, and unsettling background. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I couldn't speak, couldn't fully open my eyes. Then I heard words, fragments of phrases that reached me through the haze. Massive heart attack, critical condition, chances are slim. I realized something very serious had happened. The doctors were fighting for my life. I could feel their touch, hear their voices, but everything was like a dream. The days blurred together. My body refused to cooperate. My strength was fading. And then, after several days of this struggle, I slipped back into darkness, this time into a coma. And that's when my real journey began, a journey that would forever change the way I see life and death. While I was lying unconscious, a real nightmare began for my family. Sarah, my wife, came to the hospital every single day. She would sit next to me, hold my hand, and tell me about the kids, about how everyone was waiting for me to come home. I couldn't answer, but somewhere, deep inside, I could feel her presence, her warmth. The kids wrote me letters, drew pictures. The nurses hung them by my bed so that if I ever woke up, the first thing I'd see would be their care and love. Sometimes it seemed like I could hear their voices, quiet, anxious, full of hope. The doctors gave no guarantees. Any day could have been my last. Sarah tried to stay strong, but I know how hard it was for her. My parents couldn't find peace either. They prayed, called everyone they knew, searched for the best specialists, and hoped for a miracle. Time dragged on endlessly for them. Week after week, month after month, all they could do was wait and believe that I would come back. What was happening to me all that time? I don't remember the moment I lost consciousness. I don't remember being taken to the hospital, or the doctors fighting for my life, or the people bustling around. All of it just seemed to vanish, dissolved into darkness. At some point, I just woke up. But it was nothing like a normal awakening. I found myself in a strange, translucent space where there were no familiar sounds, no smells, no bodily sensations. Everything around me resembled long, endless corridors, filled with a soft, diffused light. The light wasn't blinding. It was warm, almost comforting, yet at the same time, it created a sense of unreality about what was happening. I felt no pain, no fear. There was only a strange calm and a slight detachment, as if I were observing everything from a distance, not participating in it. Sometimes it felt like I was floating above the floor, and other times, like I was walking, but couldn't feel my own steps. Time here flowed completely differently. Sometimes it would slow down to a complete halt. I could stand in one place, watching the play of light on the walls, and it felt like an eternity had passed. Then suddenly, everything would speed up, and I would seem to move from one corridor to another in fractions of a second. Sometimes it felt like I had spent hours here, and other times, only a few minutes. Occasionally, I would hear distant voices. They were muffled, as if coming from underwater. Someone would call my name, but the words were indistinct, as if spoken from the other end of a vast hall. Sometimes these voices would grow a little louder, and then I would feel that somewhere far away, there was someone waiting for me. I tried to move forward, but the corridors seemed endless. Every time I thought I was about to enter some new space, everything would repeat. Soft light again, silence again, the feeling again that I was alone here. Sometimes it felt like I had been wandering these corridors for an eternity with no way out. But the strangest thing was, I didn't feel completely alone. At times, I had a distinct sensation that someone or something was nearby. I couldn't see this someone, couldn't hear their footsteps or voice, but I felt a presence. It was like a gentle breath of air behind me, like a shadow flickering in the corner of my eye, as if someone was walking beside me without revealing themselves. Sometimes it felt like this presence was watching over me, protecting me, preventing me from getting completely lost. In those moments, I felt a little calmer. It seemed to me that I wasn't alone in this strange world, that someone was there, even if I couldn't see them or understand who they were. This feeling was both frightening and comforting at the same time, as if some invisible guide was leading me through these endless corridors, preventing me from giving up entirely. At some point, I realized I was no longer alone. There was someone walking beside me. It was a young guy, maybe about 20 years old, dressed very simply, a light t-shirt and dark pants. But the strangest thing was that he was missing one leg. He moved easily, as if the absence of his leg didn't bother him at all. We walked in silence through those endless corridors. Sometimes he would stop and look at me intently, as if he wanted to say something, but each time he seemed to change his mind. His gaze was calm, even a little sad, but there was no fear or anger in it. I didn't feel any threat from him. On the contrary, it seemed to me that this guy was here to help me, to keep me from getting lost or going the wrong way. His presence somehow calmed me, gave me strength to keep moving forward. I didn't know who he was or why he was there with me, but I felt I could trust him. Sometimes it seemed like he knew more about me than I did myself. There was something familiar in his eyes, as if we had met before, in another life or another world. But I didn't dare to ask. I just kept walking beside him, feeling that with him I wasn't afraid. As that guy and I walked through the endless corridors, I suddenly started remembering my life. Everything unfolded so vividly, as if someone had turned on a movie inside me, and I was watching it again, frame by frame. The most important moments flashed before my eyes. My childhood, the smell of freshly cut grass, summer holidays at Grandma's, my first school friends. Then, first love, that thrill of holding someone's hand for the first time, and it felt like the whole world stood still. I remembered the first time I saw Sarah, how we walked through the city. Then, first love, that thrill of holding someone's hand for the first time, and it felt like the whole world stood still. I remembered the first time I saw Sarah, how we walked through the city at night, how we laughed until we cried. I saw the birth of my children, those moments of pure joy when you hold a tiny miracle in your arms for the first time. I recalled family holidays, noisy gatherings, laughter, warm hugs. But there were also arguments, hurts, moments when I said too much, or, conversely, stayed silent when I should have said something important. I suddenly realized how much I hadn't managed to say to my loved ones, how often I put off important words for later, thinking there was plenty of time ahead. I hadn't told Sarah how much I loved her, hadn't thanked my parents for everything they did for me, hadn't told my children how proud I was of them. At that moment, a deep longing washed over me. I desperately wanted to go back, even for just a minute, to hug my wife, talk to my children, ask my parents for forgiveness. I realized that if I were given another chance, I wouldn't stay silent. I wouldn't put off love and gratitude for later. Sometimes, amid the silence and strange light, I began to hear voices. They were muffled, as if coming from underwater, and sometimes they seemed completely indistinct. But I could feel. They weren't just sounds, they were something very important. I heard Sarah telling me about the kids, about how they were waiting for me at home, how much they missed me. Sometimes I caught my mother's prayers, quiet, full of hope and pain. Once, I even thought I heard Tommy, my son, reciting a poem he had learned especially for me. These voices were the only thread connecting me to reality. They reminded me that somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of this strange world, people were waiting for me, loving me, hoping for my return. I tried to answer, to shout, to let them know that I could hear them, that I was here, that I was fighting. But I couldn't. My voice seemed to get stuck somewhere inside, never reaching the surface. It was agonizing to hear my loved ones, but not be able to give them even the smallest sign. One day, as the guy and I were once again walking down an endless corridor, he suddenly stopped. I felt his gaze on me. It was serious, almost piercing. For a moment, he was silent, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he quietly said, "Your time to leave hasn't come yet." At that moment, everything around me began to change. The corridors we had wandered for so long started to dissolve, as if the light was washing them away. The light itself grew brighter, almost blinding, and the voices that had once been muffled and distant suddenly became louder, clearer, as if someone was calling my name. I felt that something important was happening, that I was about to be pulled out of this strange world, back to where people were waiting for me. At some point, everything changed. I felt a sharp pain, as if someone had suddenly yanked me from the inside, pulling me back. Everything around me started spinning, the light became blinding, and the voices that had once been barely audible now sounded loud and clear. I heard the doctor shouting, felt someone's hand touching mine. Through the noise and chaos, I recognized Sarah's voice, full of both desperation and hope. "Jerry, please, come back." With all my strength, I tried to hold on to that voice, to that feeling of warmth and love. And suddenly, I opened my eyes. Around me were tears, joy, and relief. Sarah was crying and laughing at the same time. The kids were hugging each other, and the doctors exchanged glances, unable to believe their eyes. After so many months in a coma, I had come back. I was alive. In that moment, I realized just how fragile and precious life is. Everything that had seemed important before now faded into the background. The most important thing is love, support, and the faith of those close to you. It was they who didn't let me go, their voices and warmth that brought me back. When I started to come to my senses, the first thing I did was tell Sarah about everything that had happened to me during that time. I told her about the strange dreams, the endless corridors, and about the guy with one leg who was always by my side, almost as if he was protecting me. Sarah listened without interrupting, and I could see in her eyes. She was stunned. It all sounded like a fantasy, but for me, it was more real than any dream. A few days later, Sarah came to my hospital room with a look of amazement on her face. She told me that she had learned from the nurses that, at the very same time I was in a coma, a young man had died in our ward. He had recently had his leg amputated after a serious accident, and his story was well known to all the staff. I was at a loss for words. Was it just a coincidence? Or was it something more? Maybe he was the very guy who kept me from getting lost in that other world. I still don't know the answer, but from that moment on, I began to look at life, and at what happens to us on the edge between two worlds, very differently. After coming out of the coma, I had to learn how to live all over again. I learned to walk, to speak, to eat, as if I were a child taking my very first steps. It was hard, and sometimes it felt like I had no strength left. But Sarah, the kids, and my parents were always there. Their support helped me not to give up. But the most important change happened inside me. I started to see every day, every little thing, differently. I began to appreciate the simple moments: morning coffee, conversations with my family, walks in the fresh air. I started telling my loved ones how I felt more often, not putting off important words for later. Now I knew that later might never come. I began helping others, those who found themselves in a similar situation. I supported people who were fighting for their lives, talked to their families, and shared my experience. I wanted no one to feel alone in a difficult moment. This new life became a true gift for me. I learned to enjoy every day and to be grateful for everything I have. Sometimes I still ask myself, what was it all? Just a trick of the mind caused by a lack of oxygen? Or was it really an encounter with someone who had already passed on? Why was it that particular guy who became my guide? Why did he say my time hadn't come yet? I discussed this with the doctors. They explained everything from a scientific point of view: the brain, stress, hallucinations, the mind's defense mechanisms. But even they admitted that coincidences like this happen too often to be just chance. Some doctors simply shrugged, unable to offer an explanation. My family believes it was a sign. Sarah is sure that the guy really did come to bring me back to life, to keep me from getting lost in that other world. I don't know what it really was, but one thing I know for sure: after an experience like that, you can never be the same. What do you think? Do you believe in life after death? Have you or your loved ones ever experienced something similar? Write in the comments. Let's discuss it together. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and your stories. Thank you for watching my story all the way to the end. For me, this was an incredible experience that changed my view of the world forever. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content, and share this video with your friends. There are many more amazing and mystical stories ahead that I'm sure will make you think about what truly matters.